You are listening to Middle East Monitor Conversations, bringing you lively discussions with prominent voices from the region and beyond, as we delve deeper into issues shaping the Middle East and North Africa, from politics, the culture, and the arts.
Hello and welcome to another conversation with the Middle East Monitor. I'm your host today, Nasim Ahmed. We're discussing a new book, Daybreak in Gaza, Stories of Palestinian Lives and Culture, edited by Matthew Teller and Mahmoud Muna, with Juliet Touma and Jayeb Abu Safiya. I am really pleased to have both editors today. Matthew, he is an author, a journalist, documentary maker. He writes for the BBC, CNN, The Times, Financial Times, Independent, The Guardian, presents and produces documentaries for Radio 4, BBC World Services, and his book, 9 Quarters of Jerusalem, a new biography of the old city, is a must-read. So many of you will be familiar with Matthew's work. I'm really pleased to have him. And also Mahmoud. He is also a writer, publisher, bookseller from Jerusalem. He runs Jerusalem's celebrated Educational Bookshop and amongst many other things. So thank you both for joining me. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Very glad to be here, Nasim. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us, Nasim.
I mean, just a quick summary about the book. I had a chance to basically read sections of it. I mean, it's full of personal stories that sheds light on the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There's historical context of Gaza, themes of resistance, resilience, true demonstrations of what many would know as Samud, resistance and resilience, cultural identity of the Palestinians. And there are many themes and threads that run through the book. Let's begin, though, Matthew and Mahmoud. If I can ask both of you, what motivated you to compile this volume of essays and articles on Gaza? I mean, by my count, I think there was something like 46, nearly 50 entries, 50 articles by writers and activists and people who are in Gaza, people who are outside Gaza, speaking and commenting on Gaza. So let's just get your thoughts on why you felt the need to publish this fantastic series of essays. Matthew,
Shall I take it? I don't know.
Yeah, Matthew, you can start.
Okay. I'll start and then Mahmoud can come in. Sure. What motivated me was that appalling tide of news that was coming out of Gaza following October the 7th. So I, as soon as I could, started to try and speak. I'm very lucky because I'm a journalist, so I have a platform from which I can speak. So I tried to start to speak, and I was marching in London. There was a couple of events around the PALFest, the Palestine Festival of Literature. I was involved with one of them, which was great. There were a couple of other speaking things in London. But with my background in books and in publishing, it just felt to me that this was a moment when publishing in the UK needed to stand up. It needed to use its weight to declare that what was going on, what we were seeing every day in Gaza, was wrong, and was at that stage was verging on the genocidal, or perhaps was even genocidal at that point as well. And this was a moral imperative, it felt to me. I started to discuss the possibility of doing a book of some kind on Gaza in December of last year. And conversation started with Mahmoud as well, around that time, and shortly afterwards in January as well. We were very lucky to be able to try and, drawing a proposal together, and we got support from a number of individuals who we were glad to thank in the back of the book as well. And it was Saki Books, run by Lynn Gaspard in London, who stepped up and who commissioned this title, who recognized the moral imperative to act. and with a bit of shaping, as is always the way, you shape the proposal and you refine it and you target it. You try and see who are you going to be able to get to speak. We know that obviously speaking to people inside Gaza is very, very difficult for logistical reasons, because the communications are being disrupted and being cut. But also people are under trauma and in pain and experiencing loss and dispossession and in bereavement. And in grief. And that's not necessarily the best time, obviously, to start to approach people to say, would you like to write something about your experience? Because people are going to say no, if they're going to say anything at all. So working out what was going to be possible, how we were going to do it, the mix between contemporary testimonies of war and war diaries and extracts from previously published material, working out that sort of mix between ourselves and the publisher as well. And then we had 3 months to make it happen. So March, April, May was when we made it happen. That's what it felt like from here. It was a moral imperative. That was the motivation. I'm sure Mahmoud can fill in some details as well.
It's such a swift turnaround. I mean, space of a few months, you've produced this amazing, fantastic volume of, I think, more than 300 pages worth of content there. Mahmoud, do you want to? Mahmoud is joining us from Jerusalem, so there is a slight delay in him listening and, of course, in us hearing him. So, Mahmoud, go ahead. Tell us what motivated you and also some of the challenges, because as Matthew mentioned, there are nearly 50 entries, essays there. And in wartime, it's very difficult to manage and organize this level of cooperation, not least. But what I found amazing was that despite the trauma which you mentioned, Matthew, the fact that so many Palestinians found that they were able to coherently put their thoughts in an amazing, really heart-wrenching way in many instances when I read that book. So, yes, over to you, Mahmoud. Tell us about some of your motivations and some of the challenges that you want to speak about.
Right. For me, it's a question about also while we're watching the news, while we were all watching and seeing on our screen this war over destroying people's lives and destroying their buildings. There was a question for me that the city is not just stones, and the story of the city is a story of the people as well. So while as we document this war and as we write about the destruction of Gaza, we have to write the destruction of the lives of the people in Gaza. So we really wanted to highlight, or for me, I wanted to highlight the life and the works of people. And I imagined myself, what if I was in Gaza? What about if my bookshop and my little projects in literature and art and in culture, if this was me, then this war has also shattered my projects, not just essentially my life and my house, but also my project is the city in a way. I come from Jerusalem, and I suffer from the notion that cities are a set of stones. And I like to see cities as a collection, as a threads, if you like, intertwining lives of people and their work as well. And I felt during the war that we're not telling enough about the fabric of society and the work of people that is being interrupted. And my intention was to highlight that as well. Of course, we also felt like we are only referring to large amount of destructions in terms of numbers, and we're not telling enough of human stories and people's sufferings and people personal narratives. And the book was, in a way, is to tell also the story of these people as human beings and their families, their work, their books, their music instruments, their relation to the sea, their relation to their flowers and to their houses, their relation to each other as well. Despite all the difficulties in the last 20 years, the Gazans were trying to make life in the space that was given to them. Your question on challenges, I mean, you could go forever, and some of them is very obvious. But of course, we wanted to reach out mostly for people who are also in Gaza at that time. And we were racing time in a way. We knew that there's a forced displacement of the people, and we knew that we know now that we probably have not seen the worst of it yet. So we were racing the time. We're trying to reach people that are still alive, and they're willing to talk to us. And there's a way to communicate with them. The internet, phone lines were all, the technological communication aspect was a big challenge. A lot of the time, we had to interview people at midnight when there's a bit more connection. Sometimes we have to wait for people to move into a place that they have a better landline or a better communication, and to work around their life and their shattered life. It's frustrating because we take this for granted. We just pick up the phone, we just open WhatsApp, and we call to whatever. And suddenly you have to imagine that all these privileges that we got used to are really privileged, and people are denied the basic element of communication. Yet, I'll finish by saying the striking, I can't forget this, the willingness for people to speak, whether they want to speak to you at midnight or 3 o'clock in the morning, or they're gonna send you endless voicemail notes on WhatsApp or whatever. They wanted to talk. They wanted people to listen to them, and they wanted to share their stories. A lot of people have expressed how frustrated they were with friends and relatives who were just constantly checking on them, but basically they just want to know that they're alive. And once they know they're alive, for that day, there was nothing more to converse about. We came, it was like, okay, we know you're alive, and we want to know about your life, and we want to know what you're doing now and what you used to do. And I think that ability and the humanity in people to share their stories and the difficult settings that they live in, they wanted their voice to reach the world, and we've been privileged and trusted with their voice.
I mean, it is a story of many heart-wrenching accounts of what's happening in Gaza at the moment. Shocking details. There are elements of hope in some of the stories, and the resilience we keep mentioning. But you chose to give the book a really positive, optimistic title, Daybreak in Gaza. Generally, as a daybreak has positive connotation. So what's the thinking, given that you're writing a story about what's happening in Gaza right now? Of course, there's history there, but generally right now, the testimonies of Palestinians who are suffering this genocidal campaign against them. So what was the thinking behind giving it such a optimistic title, Daybreak?
I'll take that.
Matthew, sorry, Matthew.
I would say, no, that's all right. Yeah. We got this confusion because it's the two of us. It's fine. I would say, yes. I mean, even in the appalling situation that we find ourselves in, that obviously the people in Gaza find themselves now, hope remains really, really important, and optimism also remains important. I just had, I can say this now, I just had an email today from one of our contributors. And she is an eminent journalist who's been reporting on the situation in Gaza since the beginning, since October and before, for one of the major global networks. And she said in this email that she is struggling herself to try and write her own memoir and her own recollections of this appalling situation, how she's been reporting, how she's been protecting her family, how things have gone over the last months. And very touchingly, I was just reading this like an hour or two ago, she expressed how the presence of this book, the book that Mahmoud and I and others have worked on and included her words in as well, has given her some hope to push through and continue with this project, even though it's incredibly difficult for her to put down in writing the things that she's gone through and the things that she's experienced firsthand in front of her face. That sort of response where you can feel how the work that we've done has touched a particular individual in a particular way is very, very moving, and it makes all of it worthwhile. That's where Daybreak came from. That's where the idea of Daybreak, using the idea of Daybreak, came from, was to ensure that this was not a book of history. This was not looking back as to how Gaza was at one point, whether it's 5,000 years ago or whether it was 100 years ago. This is Gaza today, and Gaza today is a mix of how it was and how it is now, as a foundation for how it could be in the future as well. Culture and history and outlooks and people's lives and people's families and people's stories and going to work and looking after kids and going shopping or whatever, and eating or going to the sea, or that's all part of what makes Gaza Gaza. And so what we were trying to do was to convey that mix as a basis from which to look forward.
And I found it a powerful way of telling the story of Gaza in that way. You do have articles by people in Gaza of the 5,000-year history of Gaza and how it's been alive, it's been a center of culture and civilization. And this is just another phase in Gaza's traumatic and sometimes amazing history. And that comes across.
Sorry.
No,
I was going to say
on.
this was a theme which ran through. Many people said to us, Gaza's been destroyed before. It's been destroyed by the British. It was destroyed in this year. It was destroyed in that year. It was destroyed by a figure in history. It was destroyed and always rebuilt. And so people, several of our interviewees, several of the people we spoke to, and also the people who were writing for us as well, expressed this idea that Gaza is, as you said, it's another phase. This is a phase of Gaza's history, terrible though it is. But there will be survivors, and the city will be rebuilt. That was a very strong motivation for a lot of people, I think, to contribute as well. Mahmoud.
And Mahmoud, there's a lot to pick from. So what particular stories of resilience, hope, and even from the past about Gaza's history really resonates with you from the list of entries that are there, articles that are there?
I mean, just quickly to comment on hope as well, if I may. I mean, this is probably the most difficult question to answer generally in Palestine about hope. Where does hope come from? How we can maintain hope? I often revert to Mahmoud Darwish poetry, who had two important lines on hope. One is we are infected by uncurable disease that is called hope. The second one is we cultivate hope. We don't just harvest hope; we actually cultivate it. We plant it, we farm it, care of it, we nourish it, and then we cultivate it. We make the whole process of hope. And I think the lesson of Gaza is very much that it actually is cultivating hope in the darkest, most bleakest of time. Now for Gaza, there's also the biggest opportunities of hope as well in Gaza. And I think I'm very glad that we managed to capture that, not just in the book, its title, but also in the book itself and in the stories that we're saying. And probably any story you pick up from the book, it's going to end up with that line that we're gonna rebuild. We have a better future. We aspire for a better future. We are hopeful, and that's when you are an interviewer or on the other side of it, and you are faced with that. It's very humanizing, and it's very beautiful, and you almost feel you have no means of expressing that even in words, because often of these are emotions, and people express their hopes in tones of voice and in stories and in emotions. That's, I think, the challenge of the writers, and how to transmit that feeling into words in a page for a book. Out of choosing your favorite child now, I don't know which ones resonate for me most. I was very keen throughout the book, because of my work, is to focus on the work of art and culture. So particularly the stories of musicians and artists have touched me a lot. The particular woman singer that I interviewed, and I've been trying to for the last 2 days to get hold of, and I have not heard from her yet. I don't know any updates about her, but she's featured in the book, and she trusted us with her personal story as a woman, as a singer as well in Gaza. That really touched me a lot. I think the story that Matthew worked on with the Armenian photographer was the most surprising and the most enlightening in Gaza by the Armenian community, and the contribution of the Armenians in Gaza. That was really enlightening, and I think one of the things we hope for this book is those little stories will form a beginning of a bigger stories and a bigger project for other peoples to work on, to come and document the story of art, the story of health, the story of education, the story of photography, the story of the fishermen in Gaza. Each one of those deserve 2 and 3 books on each sectors. We kind of cherry-picked, and we kind of bought this bouquet of flowers to put in our book, but hopefully it will inspire people to work further.
Both of you are surrounded by books, and one of the stories that, the reasoning this person gave, I found quite fascinating. And this is a story of Asma Mustafa. So she's been collecting books from the age of 9, and by the time she grew up, she had a small library, like both of you in your bedrooms, wherever you may be at the moment. And after the war erupted, the Israeli invasion, I should say, they fled south, and northern Gaza was starving, and Palestinians who were living in northern Gaza had no way to start a fire. So what they were doing was using the books Mustafa left behind to start fire. And she gave, I found the way she reasoned really, really fascinating. And she said, books used to ignite our thoughts. Now books feed our children. And then if I can quote and then ask you the question I want to ask you, she goes on to say that I used to believe that learning happened in a systemized manner through the educational process of schools. It's very simple. Here, young and old alike learn at the school of war on Gaza. Here, every day, 1,000 stories are told and lived, 1,000 wounds bleed. In our deep trauma, war has forced over 2 million Gazan Palestinians to learn through experience what schools don't teach and what could never be read in textbook. So, Mustafa, that account of her past as a child and how she is reasoning through this traumatic period really resonated with me. So, I mean, can you comment on this unique capacity of Palestinians, in this case, Mustafa, displaying time after time to be able to reason through their pain and suffering and trauma in this really articulate way, and making sense of things that really, in most cases, people would not be able to make sense of? Start with you, Matthew. Sorry.
I'm going to deflect that to Mahmoud. You're asking specifically about the Palestinian experience. It's Mahmoud's turn to weigh in on that.
Go for it, Mahmoud.
This is fascinating, and this is one of really the most beautiful pieces in the book, actually. And it's really open an old wound for the Palestinians of what happened in 1948 to the Palestinian books, which was stolen from dignitaries and stolen from book lovers from people's houses in cities like Jerusalem, Jaffa, Haifa, and Nazareth. There's a lot of work has been done about this. Around 60,000 to 80,000 books were stolen from Palestinian houses in 1948 by the librarians of the Hebrew University at the time. And now they are in the National Library of Israel. This is a fascinating story that I advise your listeners and your readers to look into. So the point about books that's in our materialistic life, it's one of the things that we are attached the most to. And whenever we travel from one place to another place, we put our books in a box, and this is my books. And the first thing when you move to a house is you establish your library and you put your books on the shelf, and you don't feel home until your books are on the shelf. And here I go, the Gaza people say, actually, this is just books, if you like, and we consume the knowledge on them, and if they can feed and if they can continue the life cycle of others, then I'm willing to give up this relationship with this materialistic products that's basically paper in pursuit of the life for the others. I can't really recall in history another level of humanity in which you are giving one of your most adored objects, that they represent your history, represent your moments, and when each one of us knows what books means to him, which page he read where, which book he bought from which library, and who gave him which books, and each book is a story. Yet you are giving up all these memories in the pursuit of life. And I think this is one of the highest moral positioning that someone can take. Yet he still admire books and he still admire education, but he see books for what they are, which is a physical, materialistic object. So it is fascinating in so many levels that people are not speaking about their house that is being destroyed. They are still speaking about the books. So they value the books and they value the education, but they don't value it more than the lives of others. And they are willing to give up that for the life of the others. I think this is an interesting example to be to be studied. Now, Palestinians historically are book lovers and book collectors, and they have. And I wanted also to bring in here the role of the writers, the Palestinian writers, who entrusted with the Palestinian history and literature, who have seen themselves at the vanguard, if you like, or the front line of defending Palestinian culture and Palestinian identity by documenting about it as well. And this responsibility between the writers who write these stories and the readers who consume and spread these stories, yet in times of war, human values come first as well. And if these books can in one way save lives, then they must save lives. And we compare this with the Israeli occupation of 48 that I was speaking about earlier, and how taking out these books is like stealing the depth of the culture and the depth of the Palestinian memory. And that's why the act of stealing people's books in 48 wasn't coincidence. It was to almost nullify and almost disconnect the connection between the people and their life before by taking away these books as well. And I hope that us answering all this savagery and all of this genocide by producing a book, and the ability of people to contribute their story to be in a book, it's a continuation of the strong relationship between the Palestinians and the written words.
Talking about books, Matthew, your book, Nine Quarters of Jerusalem, it read like a book also of self-discovery. Was there an element of self-discovery in you editing this book as well? Particularly, I mean, there are a number of contributions by Palestinian Christians in Gaza. Just speak to your own personal self-discovery, if there is one, in writing this book, commenting on some of the contributions by Christian Gazans who also wrote amazing essays for this volume. And I'm going to end with one of the quotes from one of the Christian essayists in that book as well. So let's first go talk about self-discovery, if there is any to speak of.
Okay. There's always self-discovery in anything, every day you try and focus on self-discovery. Thank you for saying what you said about my previous book as well. A key factor in that, as you said, was for me, was addressing the childhood that I had, the way that I was brought up. So I'm English. I was born in London. I was born into a Jewish family. And my family are Zionist. Many of my family are in Israel as well. The part of what I was trying to do with my previous book, in that restricted element of self-discovery, was to look at the stories that I was given when I was growing up about Jerusalem, and what it meant, and who lived there, and why they lived there, and to pick that apart a bit, to deconstruct it and to put it back together in a way that made more sense to me. Being able to edit this book now about Gaza and to have a connection to that place and to the people from that place as well has, for me, deepened my my awareness of the universality of suffering, if you like. It's not a restricted occurrence. What's happening in Gaza, it happens repeatedly. It happened to Jewish people in Europe in the 20th century. It's happened in Rwanda. It's happened in Srebrenica. It's happened in Darfur. It's happened in other places as well. And what's going on today has to be a stop. It has to be a never again. The way that the world has talked about never again in the past, Gaza shows that to have been empty, because the world has not stood up and has not made what happened before never again. It keeps repeating. And for me, the self-discovery of doing this, of working on this book and being able to interact with the people who've contributed to this book, has been to understand better and more tangibly how events in Gaza can be seen in a universal context, and how what's happening in Gaza is of universal importance to everybody, whether you're connected to the region or not.
That neatly takes us into my final question to you both. I'm going to start with Mahmoud. And I want to quote you a section from Nabil Taz's view on Gaza. So Nabil is one of the Christian contributors to the book. And this is the quote: "For us, Gaza is a symbol, a place that has stood for so many years against aggression, occupation, and genocide. Today, at last, the world is seeing who the Palestinians are. We are human, ordinary human beings, symbolized in what is going on in Gaza every day. Gaza matters because it is the place where the rebirth of the Palestinian nation will probably begin."
It's such a fascinating line. And I'll ask you a question, please. I
So
love that line. When he came out with that line, I was talking to him on the screen exactly as I'm talking to you now.
So let's just go through that.
And my mouth just dropped open.
Yeah.
You know?
So take us through your feeling at that time when you read that line. I mean, that line really resonated with me, and it will end with your response to that, and also Mahmoud as well, to that quote from the quote Nabil.
I'll step in and I'll give the last word to Mahmoud. I mean, as I said, it's an extraordinary line, and it's extraordinary perspective. We've talked about how that idea of rebuilding after destruction is so key and so central to a Gaza identity. But to have it expressed so eloquently, so pithily, it's very concise, it's very short, it's a few lines. It's spoken. That particular piece was not written. That was a spoken, like a transcript of a spoken interview. And to characterize Gaza as the place from which the Palestinian nation will be reborn is just an extraordinarily powerful idea in the situation that we are today. I can't top it. And it's I should just give the floor to Mahmoud, because it reflects much more on how Palestinians see Gaza and how Palestinians see their own nation, and where those locuses of energy and rebuilding will emerge from after this catastrophe is done.
For me, what's beautiful about this is because it does really connect the past to the future as well. In one way, it addressed the importance of Gaza historically for Palestine, has always been a catalyst for Palestinian history, or something major in Palestine have happened in Gaza historically. We must not forget that also the Intifadas and the Palestinian national movement, even with all the critique that we have, even the peace process and the beginning of the Palestinian state in the 90s started also in Gaza. So Gaza is not just a city kind of tucked away on the Mediterranean. It has played an important part of the Palestinian history. And Nabil is very aware of that because he was born there and he consumed Gaza, and Gaza consumed him as a Gazan as well. But it's also hope, because it also look at the future and see how this and what's happening to Gaza, yet Gaza again will re-emerge and will reborn, and it will contribute to hopefully the beautiful future of the Palestinians, and it will form that long desired Palestinian liberation as well. And I think for someone from Jerusalem, we consumed with the centrality of Jerusalem to the Palestinian story, and I feel a bit challenged with the presentation of Gaza, as Gaza actually is the centralist to the Palestinian story. But the truth is that all are. And the Palestinian territories is one, and what Gaza has contributed is complementary to what Jerusalem has contributed, to what Hebron has contributed, to what Jaffa has been contributed, to what Naples has contributed. And I think that's the message, one of the message that I think will emerge after these wars, that the Palestinians are one unit, they are one, and whether the struggle is in Gaza or is in Jerusalem, or in the other parts of Palestine, historic Palestine, it's all complementary, and it all should feed into the notion of a free and dignified Palestinian life for the future. And that's the hope, and that's hopefully one of the messages we're getting out of the book.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you, Matthew. It's really been fascinating. I really enjoyed this conversation. And thank you for putting together this volume of essay, especially at this moment when there's so much horror going on, for you to be able to capture the real resilience, real eloquence, and the articulate manner in which Palestinians in Gaza are expressing their pain and suffering, and also optimism. I think, you guys have done amazing work in putting this together. Where can our readers buy this book? I mean, because I read a PDF copy. Where can they buy this book?
Anywhere and everywhere. It should be available, where it's on all the big online bookstores, which don't need another plug from me. I'm not sure it's available exactly from the publisher's website until later in the summer. I think they're doing a website revamp. Saki Books is the publisher, sakibooks.com. They can order from there. There are links all over the place. So it's available wherever you buy books. You can order this book.
Okay.
Let me just show. I'll show.
We will try. That's the cover. Okay.
I'll show.
We'll put a link.
This
We'll put a link to the book when we publish this.
We must also remind readers that all the proceeds and all the profits from this book is going the charity Medical Aid for Palestine. Myself and Matthew and publishers and the agents, we all contribute a big part of our income to the charity work. So also this hopefully encourage people to buy the book in support of Medical Aid for Palestine as well, which doing incredible work for the people in Gaza.
That's fantastic. So just a reminder again, all the profits from the sale of this book will go to Medical Aid for Palestine. So, and we will put a link to the book as well when we upload. Thank you again so much, Matthew. Thank you again, Mahmoud. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Take care. And viewers at home who have tuned in, thank you so much. And see you next time for another conversation with the Middle East Monitor. Bye-bye.
This was Middle East Monitor Conversations, brought to you by the Middle East Monitor in London.